and welcome to The Couch. I'm your host, Fazil Jacobs. Tonight we're changing the pace from what we've normally had on the show, and we welcome Mohammed Junaid Chafika, also known as M.J Li, to the studio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Shishya.
Kung Fu. This is what you're known for. and a boy from the Cape Flats. I think it's an amazing story in terms of how this ended up in your, on your radar, so to speak. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
I'm sure you'll have subtitles. Ni hao mei wo de ming je kung fu di nam fei. Wo lao xi nam fei. Wo de ming je ma hiao hu ma li jian. So just putting it into perspective like that, being able to speak the basics of Mandarin, Faisal, I never expected as a youngster from Cape Town, from the Cape Flats, who came from humble beginnings, that I would get to learn a very complicated language and then be introduced to a fascinating culture in the form of the Chinese civilization, and then embark on a journey of Kung Fu, a Chinese martial arts. It's what I can classify today as my bliss, my inner peace, and just over 2 decades down the line as a professional, having represented my country on numerous occasions, I can say beyond a shadow of doubt, it is the best decision that I made in my life. And if I were to change anything, I'd leave it unaltered.
So how were you introduced to Kung Fu?
Well, I was a youngster growing up in Cape Town. I was very good at track and field athletics. I excelled in cricket, rugby, soccer. I still enjoy these sporting codes. At one point, I thought that I would have played for the Cobras as a lower order, useful batsman, good swing bowler. I thought at some point this is probably where I would end. But my dad recognized my interest in martial arts, and the Almighty blessed me with agility, natural flexibility, quick on my feet, and he then went about trying to find a formal school in Cape Town. But then my grandfather was actually ahead of my dad, because he worked for Shell Oil as a rigger. So he traveled 6 months of the year working in Taiwan and Hong Kong. And in the late 80s, he brought back this black Kung Fu trouser that was synonymous with Bruce Lee. Yeah. And he brought me a pair of these slipper-like Kung Fu shoes, which we don't even use as professionals anymore. And he brought me back a couple of VHS movies, which I still have in my collection, mind you. Enter the Dragon, The Big Boss, nice. Chinese Connection, etc., Fists of Fury. And I think that started off...
Some of the classics,
eh? Absolutely, absolutely. It started of what maybe could have been classified as a craze or as a phase, but it's something that I gradually grew into. So my dad found an imam, actually, who was teaching at a hall next to the mosque in Rocklands. And I went for training on a Friday evening, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. So Friday, late afternoon, I would go to the library with my dad first in Rocklands, and then from there he would take me for Kung Fu training. Saturday morning also he would go to the library, and then followed up by Kung Fu training. And Sunday morning, and I tagged my second eldest brother along against his wishes, because I was the eldest, so I felt this was the right thing to do. And I trained a couple of years like that, met Andy Liu, trained under him. He was the Chinese ambassador to South Africa, his son. And then he explained to us the dynamic of Kung Fu in China. It's not just a sport or a martial arts system. It's a way of life. It's part of the ancient Chinese culture and civilization. And Kung Fu just translates as energy. And he suggested, with the potential that we should go to China, and a good couple of years after that, I had an amazing opportunity to travel to China, go to the Shaolin Temple, train there, go to Mount Wudang where Tai Chi originated. And I think that will probably just live in my mind forever, because it was a massive cultural shock for me as a South African, having to go to China and travel there the food is different, the language is different, and it was about adapting to a different culture. And I think when we appreciate another culture,
Yeah.
it leads to the appreciation of what you have. And it made me appreciate the fact that I'm a South African and we come from a multicultural spectrum that is beautiful. And when we say that we are a rainbow nation, we actually need to understand exactly who we are and how we take up our place, you know, in the global village. And I think those experiences, traveling to China and then getting an opportunity to represent my country, if I could do it all over again, I would do it exactly like that again.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And how long were you in China for? Did you stay there?
Yeah, look, you train for like 7-8 months for the year, and then the school or academy closes, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because there are even times of the year in China where locals don't even train. It's either too hot or it's too cold. So if in the north it is excessively cold in winter, in the south it is extremely hot in summer. So it has these diverse climatic conditions. So you would train for about 7-8 months, 7 months tops for the year, and then you'd come back home and then go back the following year. So I went back and forth like that for approximately 7 years. And I think it was just amazing to go back to China last year after a break of a few years. And then I got an opportunity to meet a few grandmasters that were beyond proficient in the southern styles of Kung Fu, because every region in Kung Fu has its own style. And it's what was promoted by a family or a village.
I have these visions
or
of movies playing off in my head.
That's exactly what it is. You know, exactly what it is. Just the realistic version thereof. And so last year was just brilliant. And my wife then used it as an opportunity to go to China for the first time, and she then started training as well.
Wow.
And I got an opportunity also to train in dragon and lion dance, which is also styles of Kung Fu, which many people don't know. And I think it was just amazing to get back to the country and immerse myself in that culture and in that tradition.
Sure.
Because it's something that never really leaves you. I believe when we travel, and you know, because you've traveled extensively as well, when we leave our country and we spend a few days or a few weeks in another country, we appreciate that culture, we integrate with the locals. And that makes us realize that we are global citizens.
Yeah.
But we leave a part of our soul behind in that country, because you can think back with fond memories afterwards. What you've experienced, what the food tasted like. That is you leaving a portion of your essence behind. And if we can travel the world and understand that, you know, the entire world is at our disposal, that we are part of this global citizenship, and that we are actually citizens of the world, we must not confine ourselves only to where we are.
Exactly. I think also there's so many lessons that can be learned
Absolutely,
traveling. And I think you hit the nail on the head a little earlier when you said that you learn to appreciate what you have.
Yes.
And we become so focused on the negatives that surrounds us.
Correct.
That all of a sudden you'll see it's not that different elsewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a couple of weeks ago I was given another amazing opportunity to go to India for 15 days. And I was in India when I was like a teenager, and it was something that was just offered to me. My book was just launched, the soft launch took place at the end of September, and then the tourism industry and the Indian High Commission in Hyderabad asked me, don't you want to come to India and promote your book there? And let's see how, you know, you can actually interact with youth. And then I ended up going to India and then retracing my grandfather's steps, who came to South Africa in 1910,
Wow.
you know, as a pauper, and literally worked as a laborer. He used to chop wood on the top of Signal Hill because he came here with nothing. And he would carry these bags of wood on his back down to the harbor and then sell it for the day. And that was his income. And this is how he actually built a family several years later. And I got to then appreciate, you know, my grandfather's dynamic from my father's side, and I got to meet my grandfather's family in their village, and then coming to Hyderabad and then interacting with youth at schools. And I was taken to 7 schools and colleges to do motivational talks and Kung Fu demonstrations, and then I got introduced to the media in India. They convened a press conference, and there we had to launch my book there. And I thought, wait, this is moving a bit too fast. Sometimes we tend to think of one thing, you know, but the universe and the master of the universe has a much bigger plan.
Yeah.
And you then go with that. You know, if you feel this is where you're going, You move with
Yeah.
it because that is where you're destined to go. And I think even there also being in India, then appreciating what we have in South Africa. And you also see the work ethic in so-called poor countries, how people do not make excuses. Me, I cannot say that I had any excuses. Yes, I came from an impoverished background. I came from a difficult background where the area that I grew up in Mitchell's Plain, gang-infested area, known for antisocial behavior, but I made a different choice.
Yeah. It comes down to the choices we make.
Ultimately, and you cannot blame anyone for that. So I was not, cushioned and sent to an expensive independent school or former Model C school. No, I attended all our local schools on the Cape Flats.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say this is where I came from. But one, I believed, and I still do, that we all have our own unique dream. And this dream is copyright to you. It belongs to you. No one can snatch that dream away from you. What you need to do is accept, beyond a shadow of doubt, I need to work, put in every ounce of effort, every fiber of your body has got to be channelized into that dream. It's not going to happen overnight, but you need to relentlessly pursue this and accept that you've been created special, because we all have. There's no duplicate like you, period. There may be a doppelganger that looks slightly like you.
We're all unique in our own
But
way.
we are all unique, and this is the unique blueprint of the Almighty. And what you then need to do is, you need to accept that a master dwells within. And that master is not Kung Fu. That master is your potential. And in order for you to reach your true potential, you need to recognize that master exists within. Untapped resources that are on the inside. Release it and become the best version of yourself.
Giving me chills here. We got to take a break, but I'd like to pick this up. Please stay tuned. After the break, we're going to catch up with M.J Li, talk about his work in the communities and the release of his new book. We'll be with you shortly. We welcome you back to the Couch Coach. I'm your host Fazal Jacobs, and in studio today we have Kung Fu warrior, if you will, M.J Li. MJ, before we went on break, you were telling us about your journey, how it came about, and I think in true fashion of a patron of any sport, really, it's about also giving back. And I believe you're doing some great work with kids from our communities. Would you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I always wanted to do, and it just happened organically. I believe that God has blessed me, but I also had to work very hard. That is important. We should not resign ourselves to the mindset that God is going to change my conditions for me and I don't do anything. So your destiny has been written out for you. It's up to you to actually meet that date with destiny.
Sure.
So that date with destiny is every single day. So God has blessed me. He's made me a 5 times gold medalist, 3 times Legends of Kung Fu World Champion. And I haven't reached the stage where I feel that I want to retire yet. I still feel that I've got a lot in me, in as far as wanting to represent my country is concerned. It's always a massive honor to represent my country on the world stage. And it's what we as professional athletes, we strive for. You strive for hours and hours of preparation and training. That is actually your competition, not when you get there.
Yeah, the competition was with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what then happens is you ascend the podium and you become that champion. But it's not about that moment. The moment is actually you preparing 20 years before that, where you had no money for equipment, you had no sponsorship to go overseas, and these are all things that I've experienced over the years. and people naysaying and have lots of negative things to say, more negative than positive. What you should do as an individual is encapsulate all of that and bear in mind what has happened, because that will be repeated to you in a few years' time. And when you do experience success, you need to prove to yourself that you are worthy, and not to prove to your critics, because that is not important. I believe when someone destabilizes you mentally and makes you feel you're not worthy, what is worse than that is if you accept what they say. So if they say, MJ, I believe you will never become a world champion because you're not good enough, it's a negative statement. But what is worse than that statement is if you accept that. Because then your very potential, you belie that. And you are not allowing yourself then to reach that master that is deep inside. So after having become the champion again in 2016, I thought preparing for the Legends World Championship and then winning gold, 4 actually, that it was about that. And then I got back to South Africa, and one newspaper article and one interview and one comment and a journalist meeting me at the airport, and then it produced sort of like a flurry of requests. And I'll never forget this gentleman, a teacher at KUNGFU High School, and he called me up and he's listen, MJ, I've been following your career for a good couple of years, and I saw the article in the paper, and I saw you on television. Can you come out to the school and do a motivational talk? We'll gather all the learners at KUNGFU High School, and this is actually where it started. And what we'll do is we'll introduce you, and if you'd allow, we take pics with the learners. You come along with the medals, put it on display. And I agreed. I said, okay, there's a cool opportunity, to meet our youth in Cape Town. And what I did not know was that particular visit would produce a ripple effect 4 years later. So that one visit then got other principals querying and asking. And before 2016 had concluded, from August to November, I had visited about 18 schools in Cape Town. And then there was a request for me to do a schools tour across the province, and it was then formally done. And I think 117 schools later, including PE, KZN, and Gauteng and Pretoria. I then decided that I do not want a romanticized campaign where I go to a school and I come with this bling of gold medals and kids are all impressed, and I do a couple of demonstrations and then I leave. What happens then? Maybe I've left them with something, I've said something that triggers off something in them, but there's no guarantee. And I said to the first 10 schools in 2017, I can adopt 10 schools in the province, and it eventually became 12. And I will offer up my time free of charge, because I knew most of the learners come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I will come out, if you've got the space and you've got the learners that are eager, and I'll teach them Kung Fu, absolutely free. And hundreds and hundreds of kids started enrolling, and it makes you think of Carl Douglas's Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting. And we then saw over 400 plus kids across the province all take up Kung Fu training. It was just amazing introducing them to the basics of this. And I thought it was about that. And we then hosted an informal tournament where about 80 of the kids that had been training for 8 months, they competed. We had the Chinese ambassador that attended as a special guest, and media from Beijing came and they attended, and they broadcast some of the excerpts of the tournament live. And then I got an indication of what it is exactly I got myself into. And then I said to the 70 students, you know what, I'm looking for 20 with the most potential. Every year I get an invitation to compete at the Hong Kong International Wushu Championship. And I want to take a squad of 20 athletes from the province that will undergo rigorous training, and you will compete as a beginner. So in 2018, we took a squad of 17. I got close to the 20, and they competed. They came back with 3 silver, 3 bronze, and 1 gold.
Wow. Well done.
And then I also competed, and they got an opportunity to see me compete as a professional, because there is a professional division. And We then prepared an even smaller squad this year that went to Hong Kong, and yeah, they came back with 6 gold, 3 silver,
Wow.
and
Well
1
done.
bronze. So a lot of the students now have been training for 4 years, and I think it's an inspiring experience
Sure.
for me to work with youth who come from disadvantaged communities. I mean, many of my students live in Langa, Guguletu, they live in informal settlements, and here we are taking them out of that dynamic and we're introducing them to a global stage where they are not peers, but they are ambassadors of the country.
Yeah.
You know, where it's not just about the training, and then they also get to experience Chinese culture because they're taken on cultural tours. And as you know, traveling is the best form of education.
For sure.
So I think 4 years later, it's been an amazing journey. Next year, we'll be taking our 3rd squad to Hong Kong, and that hopefully will include some students that I've started training in Gauteng as well, in PE, Eastern Cape, and then obviously the bulk of the squad will be Western Cape.
Just a question on this. So you take Kung Fu, and I'm going to flip back to those movies we used to watch as kids, and you see the fighting and that, and you fast forward to 2019, Hanover Park, I mean, Groenvlei, it's on the doorstep
Yes,
there.
yes, yes.
Gangsterism, the violence that you're exposed to and that. Aren't you giving kids the tools to fight?
You know, I think if they look at me as an example, as people tend to think with short-sighted vision. When they think martial arts, they think Kung Fu, they think, it's a quick punch, you kick and you're changing
Sort you out now.
You know, it's not about that, you know, because to defeat the opponent will make you brave, definitely. But in order for you to become that master, i.e. your destiny, and you really become the person you're destined to, you must understand that your greatest competition is you. And once you can master the self, you become fearless. So what is the difference between being fearless and brave? If you ask anyone, what would you want to become, brave or fearless? I think 10 out of 10 would say, I want to become fearless.
Yeah.
So if they look at me as an example, that it's not about fighting, it's not about me wanting to show you how good I am. Because if that is the thinking, then you are actually not doing martial arts. Because there's a clear difference between fighting and martial arts. Everyone fights, you know, but not everyone can do martial arts. It's a system. It's a code that molds you mentally, emotionally, psychologically. You know, and what I say to my students is the greatest slogan and mission statement that you find dominant at Kung Fu schools in the north of China. And I think a lot of Muslims can relate to that all over the world. And the mission statement is, the strongest warrior is not he who strikes the opponent to the ground. The strongest warrior is he who is able to control his temper.
Sure.
And if any youngster wants to do Kung Fu, that is the first thing I say to them. If you can control your temper, which is not difficult, and it's also not easy. You know, it's like a double-edged sword. Because even me at World Championship, so the opponent quickly strikes me, then you do get that rush of blood where you want to retaliate. But gathering your thoughts, knowing that if I do retaliate now, I'm going to retaliate in anger. So I'm harming myself and the opponent. And Kung Fu speaks of Wu Di, which means that you need to have the martial arts heroism. You need to be able to defend yourself, your family, and your community. And at the same time, where you are in a position really to harm the opponent, you must know when to draw the line.
Sure.
So I think for kids and teenagers, if you talk about martial arts and they just want to fight, those are the first lessons that I would teach them. And students are taught forms. I think in karate they would call it kata. In Kung Fu we call it taolu. So if we see there are students, you know, they have a problem with perhaps behavior or temper, then they are taught forms first, because forms develop discipline.
Sure.
And from the discipline, right now you can do sanda, which we call Chinese kickboxing.
Nice. So we're running out of time here, and I see you got a little thing there next to you. Tell us about the book.
Okay, so we've just launched my book. It's part 1 at the moment, Kung Fu, My Journey. The history, it's been 10 years in the making. We did a soft launch on the 30th of September. Part 2 will hopefully be on the shelves in 2020. The formal launch hasn't taken place yet. I know the formal launch will be hosted by the Mayor of the City of Cape Town, Mr. Dan Plato. That's on the 28th of November. The book, in essence, comprises of 3 aspects. The first 2 chapters tells my story from humble beginnings to becoming a world champion and what I experienced. And also there are a lot of chronicles of experiences while I was traveling in China and so forth, and some of the amazing experiences that I've had. And then there are 4 chapters in the book as I was conducting research as I was traveling across China that speaks about the ethnicities in China. There are 56 ethnicities in China. Out of the 56 ethnicities, the Han are obviously the dominant ethnicity. 6 out of 10 Chinese nationals are from the Han ethnicity. Then the 4 out of 10 are 55 minority ethnicities. The largest of the 55 minority ethnicities are the Khoi Muslims. And for perhaps viewers are not aware, but Islam arrived in China in the 6th century during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he sent a diplomatic mission under the great general Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, and he took the message of Islam to the Tang Emperor, Li Shimin or Taizong. So there's a bit of that history, when Islam arrived there, who the Khoi Muslims are, and all these ethnicities. And then it also speaks about the Khoi who developed their own style of Kung Fu about 800 years ago, and it became a very popular and dominant style. And then the last chapter is dedicated to my mother, Salma Shafika. She was my source of inspiration. She passed away on the 25th of August 2019. Very sad, but the Almighty had His plan. The book would have been launched in August, and it came at the time when she was critically ill, and then days before the launch she passed away. So the book is dedicated to her because my mother was a feisty, strong-willed and opinionated female. And I think about the 16 Days of Activism campaign and gender-based violence, and I think of her because she was a white South African woman who came from German and Turkish descent. She married an Indian man at the height of apartheid. My dad was an Indian, and he was a person of color, and she gave up her so-called privilege to live with the people of color. She was active in the 1970s and 80s with the student uprisings. She was there with the Trojan Horse Massacre. She got arrested on more than 6 occasions. And she was a voice for the voiceless. She was like an educator, a counselor. You know how many people have come to us saying to us that, we experienced a rocky patch in our marriage, and she counseled us. I was about to commit suicide, and she got me out of this dark period.
An amazing woman.
She was an amazing woman. And I think to the viewers of your show, Faisal, if you still have your mother that is with you, appreciate her and cherish her, because they are worth beyond gold. And we think that it's about us ascending that podium and becoming that world champion. You do not know what prayer your mother has made for you as you board the plane, the sacrifices that they've made over the years. So it's a tribute to her, and I think in essence it's a tribute to all women. I believe the message of my book is that I was molded by a strong warrior woman who molded me into the champion that I am today, and I'll never be able to forget her. And we should love, respect and honor all of our women. So I'm hoping that the book also maybe in 2020 becomes available in the libraries in Cape Town and in the Western Cape.
If anybody wants to, sorry to cut you because we've got to wrap now.
Yes.
But if anybody wants a copy of the book, how can they get a hold of a copy?
So if they want to get a hold of a copy of the book, I'm grateful. Over 1,200 copies have been sold in a month so far, and no formal launch has taken place, and it's just been Cape Town. So they can just contact the M.J Li Kung Fu Foundation. They can speak to Salma. They can email her, or they can call her, WhatsApp her.
Email address over here, Jam.
It is. It is. So they can just contact her. There are limited copies available at the moment. Once the mayor has done the formal launch, and then we'll negotiate, and the book will become available across the country, and you'll find it on all bookshelves.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Thank
We
you
hope
very
to have you back onto the show with some of the kids and some of the success stories.
That would be great. Perhaps before we leave for Hong Kong
That'll
in
be
April
amazing.
next year, I think it would be wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching this amazing story. We look forward to seeing you next week.